108 economists versus 131 chartered accountants. India's data credibility debate has taken a new turn. Here's how it all began. Last week, 108 economists released a scathing letter that started off by saying India's economic statistics is in shambles. The letter raised concerns about India's data integrity, accused the government of suppressing uncomfortable data, and urged the government to ensure that statistical agencies are not subject to political interference. Now, 3 days later, 131 chartered accountants have issued a counter letter calling the concerns of the economists, and I quote, baseless, choreographed and politically motivated. They also say that the letter by the economists resembles the previous, again I quote, award wapsi exercise in the wake of the upcoming elections. At that time, it was the upcoming state elections. The key focus in these two letters is the GDP data revision. The letter by the economists argues, and I quote, the new GDP series with the revised base year 2011-12 showed a significantly faster growth rate for the years 2012-13 and 13-14 compared to growth rate under the earlier series. These revised estimates were surprising as they did not square with related macro aggregates. Since then, with almost every new release of GDP numbers, more problems with the base year revision have come to light, end of quote. In response to that, the letter by the chartered accountant says, and I quote, the new GDP series introduced is compliant with the United Nations guidelines in the System of National Accounts 2008 for the first time. It takes information for the corporate sector and has better estimates of the unorganized sector on unincorporated enterprises, as well as data on sales and service taxes, end of quote. To discuss the arguments and the counter-arguments made in these two letters, I have with me signatories to both the letters. Nirmal Jain of the IIFL Group and Vikas Khemani of Carnelian Capital Advisors are the two signatories to the letter by the chartered accountants. JNU Economics Professor Himanshu and R. Nagaraj, Professor at the IGIDR, the Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research in Mumbai, are the two signatories to the letter by the economists. Gentlemen, welcome to this discussion and thank you very much for joining me. Let me start first with Nirmal Jain. Okay. All right. Vikas, if I can come to you. The letter by the chartered accountants first says that, quotes the statement that the 108 economists signed saying that data is in shambles. And then it goes on to say that these economists, where were they when India has, speeded up its rate of growth compared to several other countries like Japan, China, Taiwan, Korea, and now when India has become the fastest growth. And at that time, where were these 54 economists to laud the performance of the economy? Now, I just wanted to say, because they have questioned the data, I don't think they have said that India is not growing fast. They're only saying, why was the unemployment data not released? The GDP series is, too erratic and confusing. So their allegation is not that India is not growing. Why are you making that allegation?
No. I think, Lata, one has to very clearly understand. Don't read only one part of the letter. I think let me go to the GDP allegation. Ask these economists, is it India is the only first country which has done this, or is it the first time it has happened in India? I think it is very well laid down process. Go back to the World Bank site, which clearly says, and I will give you the text, which says that it is a very usual process for every economy to revise their GDP data. Some does quarterly, some does annually, some does more. Usually, these revisions are to give the representations to the relevant industries with the right weight. And usually, these revisions are upwards. Okay. No. So I think one thing is very clear that it is not her first time. I think the timing is questionable. If this economist was so much concerned, then GDP data is not revised today. It is, to my mind, is like intolerance debate which keeps on creeping around, elections. This is not about real concern being expressed. It is about maligning the image of the country. GDP debate.
Wait, 1 minute. One allegation at a time. That base years are routinely revised. and that this is the usual intolerance debate, this is maligning the country. That's what you're saying. Okay, let me go to the two signatories of the other letter. Professor Nagaraj, what's your charge? Base years are regularly revised. What is the specific charge? Your charge is that base year has been revised, or your charge is that base year has been revised and there is something else, that the previous data is being shown in bad light?
No, base year revision is a routine process which we all agree. We have no complaints about that. But the process in which it was done, the growth rates were much higher in the new GDP series, which is something which usually never happened before, which never happens. When base year revision happens, the absolute size of GDP usually expands, but growth rates never changes. Okay. That's been the history. But in this case, for the first time, we find the growth rates for the years after the revision have increased, which never happens. And the notion that it's the first time we are following the international guidelines is simply false. India has always followed the UN system of statistics, UNSNA, and therefore it is wrong to say that it is the first time we are following the international. And the third point, this is not a general political statement. We have made very specific points to data and the issue and the institutional governance. Okay, so please do not mix up this with the general political issues, because they are two separate. We are professional economists, and we have criticized the data even earlier. Okay. If the critics, if you take me as a representative, we have earlier on criticized the earlier data. Okay. In fact, I have a paper in 2009 in EPW where I have criticized the earlier series. Okay. Therefore, it is a professional issue, and it is not a political issue.
Okay. Well, Vikas, I must tell you that all these professors know that base years are revised every 10 years. I don't think that is the point at all.
I would encourage you to go to World Bank site and read there. It clearly says that whenever these revisions have happened, usually growth rates are upward. Usually.
Okay. Listen, 1 minute, Vikas. 1 minute. One minute, Vikas. When the GDP growth rate was changed, the base year was changed from 2004 to 2011-12, and the CSO backcast the series, it actually brought down the GDP for the years 2004 to 2009. The original number was 8.1% average. And the new series has brought it down to 6.9%. So that is going against what you are saying. When the backcasting of the series happened, the original number of 8.1 for the 5 years 2004 to 2009, under the new series, new backcast, has come down to 6.9. It is not squaring with your charge.
See, if you see historical revisions data, I don't have that, how it happens, whether it is... the World Bank clearly says whenever you are giving representation to a new industry, the new weightage has to be given to the current relevant weight of the industry. And in that situation, it is always usually upward. This is the World Bank statement, and you can go back and read on
their site. But then in the CSO's case, they've revised it downward. Even for the years 2009 to 2014, the original series was 7.4. The new series has revised it down to 6.7. Professor Himanshu, your take on the charge made by the chartered accountants.
Let me just clarify a few things first. First of all, World Bank does not collect any data from India. It takes data which is given by the National Statistical System. Our problem is basically what is coming out from the National Statistical System. The chief of the National Statistical System has resigned, saying that there was some kind of interference, and the report that he had approved for employment and unemployment was not allowed to be released. Now, this is coming out from the chief of the National Statistical Commission. So it's not that we are creating this kind of a image as such that is being brought out on us. The timing is basically related to that. That resignation happened end of January. February, it is the Niti Aayog which comes out and says that we are the ones who are going to vet the statistical system or the data that is going to come out of it. Again, we found it simply unbelievable that the Niti Aayog will have the competence or even the authority to come and clarify on the data issues. On the GDP series, again, we have no problems. The only problem that comes out is that there are two agencies of the government themselves. One is the National Statistical Commission, which has been mandated to release the back series. They bring out a back series. That back series is countered by the Niti Aayog, and that is withdrawn. A new back series is generated by the Niti Aayog, and it is presented by the Niti Aayog in a different press conference. Now, here is the problem. If there's everything going on well in the statistical system, we would not have had any problem. We will keep arguing about it. And all of the people who are signatory in this particular letter are people who have been working on the data, not just from outside as a user, but they have been part of the national GDP system revision system, including Professor Nagaraj, who has been part of the revision system. So he knows the data inside out. Some of us have been part of the National Statistical Commission in different groups, in different ways. And the other people who have signed on this letter have been very much seriously involved in the base revision as well as the other issues that are being talked about. I think the charge that we are making is not about whether this growth rate is high or that growth rate is low. That is not the issue. We have absolutely no problem. The problem is that when your own chief of RBI, which is Raghuram Rajan, had pointed out, he had objections to this issue. The IMF had an objection to the new GDP series when it was brought in out. The chief economic advisor had pointed out, has raised doubts on the new GDP series, but you also had many other people raising doubts on the same on the GDP series. We are only saying that by doing this, we are basically reducing the credibility of the statistical system. And all of this, a large part of that is coming from within the system itself. Even if you forget us, what we are doing or what we have written about, what is going to happen. But the fact that the two agencies of the government are basically giving two different kind of estimates, that does raise questions on the data and how the data system is being manipulated. I mean, look at the chief of the Niti Aayog basically blaming the two independent members of the National Statistical Commission. And that again is in bad taste. And this is obvious to everybody who is reading the newspapers. It doesn't have to come from the 108 Economist. It is something that is obvious from anybody who is looking at the state of the data. Even today, the employment-unemployment survey data, which has been passed by the experts. Again, these are experts who have been working on this for years now. Has been passed not just in one meeting, but in several meetings, and the government has refused to release it. Same is the case with the Labour Bureau data. Forget about the GDP data. What happened to the Labour Bureau data? Why has that been suppressed? What happened to the crime data on agricultural suicides, farmer suicide? Why has that been suppressed? You look at the number of data sources where this kind of interference has been happening, and on a regular basis, that raises questions, and we just are asking for the system to be restored. The independence of the statistical system has to be restored. Whether the GDP growth is higher or lower, it's a technical issue, and one can't simply use the World Bank or IMF or some other agency to validate a data which has been generated by the government of India. So that, I think, is the real issue. And I think the issue is being diverted by making personal accusations as that this has happened at this point of time, these people have a motivation. I think this is where it is going into a completely different trajectory, and it's taking away the core of the issue. And I think the chartered accountants, as well as us, all of us, including you as a media professional, are interested in having one credible set of data. That something is our common interest, and that common interest cannot simply be served by making baseless accusations on other people. These are people, some of them who are there, who are people who have had credentials which does not require certification from some other individuals.
Yeah. Professor Himanshu, Shireen has now joined me. Shireen, go ahead.
Now, I just wanted to go across to Nirmal Jain, and Nirmal Jain joins us now as well. Nirmal, you're one of the signatories of the letter that's been sent by 131 chartered accountants saying that the letter or the open appeal made by the 108 economists is politically motivated. Now, the question on suppression of data, which is a charge that has been made by 108 economists, and we just had Professor Himanshu here taking us through a whole host of issues to back that charge. And it's not just the NSSO data which has not been released. They're also talking about the Labour Bureau data which has not been released, the crime data which has not been released, the farmer suicide data which has not been released. So, Nirmal Jain, do you think that is not an issue? The fact that there is not just, I mean, we can argue about what information is accurate and what information to your mind is being manipulated because of political motivations. But the fact of the matter is that this was data that used to be released regularly, which isn't anymore. Does that not concern you?
So, I mean, there are millions of data points that in any country can be released and talked about. So basically, I think what we have done, or what, in terms of from my point of view, we have our own research department and they track the economic data. So I can just talk about that. So what happens that many small
Sure.
data points might have a minor relevance from an overall point of view. And really, I can't, comment on that what data points are being released, what data points are not being released, and what is the context or what is the reason for doing that. Are they being replaced by a different set of data points? So, but, the point is that it is not that there is a suppression of facts in a manner which is, to show things that are getting better. That things are getting better, which is for everybody to see. And there are a lot of data points that indicate that.
So give us examples
I
of
really
where
have
you
no
believe
view on
that
the
there are
crime
data
data.
points that indicate that...
You know what happens, Siri? There'll be many...
you're saying that the economy... Yeah. Go ahead, Nirmal.
You know what happens that in such a large country, when there are millions of data points being discussed, there may be certain data which are, maybe replaced by a different set of data, which may be superior or more relevant. So, we just can't pick up, a few small things like crime data or suicide data
Nirmal,
and talk about
No. But
Yeah.
why? The question that the other side would argue is that this was data that used to be accessible and available up until now. It's not being accessed and not being made available now. So no one is arguing about the fact that the quality of data collection should be improved, or there should be better ways of trying to put out data. The question that is being asked by the economists who have written that letter is that why is it that selectively some data is being suppressed? Now, you yourself pointed out that you don't know the reasons behind that, but you're a signatory to this letter which makes a charge saying that this is a politically motivated accusation being made by these economists.
Because the inference that is being drawn is not correct, because the larger, more important data points are there for everybody to see. And, as I said, that you may not have one data point, but you have a surrogate data point which may be equally relevant. And as I said, I have absolutely I don't have a complete list of data points that are there, not there, but I know for sure that the macroeconomic data points that are there, which are relevant and which are adequate to understand how economy is doing, and actually there, I don't see any problem there.
Okay, no, Nirmal...
For instance, yeah.
No, Nirmal, the letter by the Economists points out that the unemployment data survey by the NSSO has not been released. Now that we now have the leaked report, it said that the unemployment shot up to a 45-year high of 0.1% in the year after demonetization. So the conclusion you make is that it was embarrassing to the government and that's why it was not released. That is a fair, if that is not the case, even today the government can release the unemployment data. Why is it not releasing? Vikas?
Okay. I think as far as, I understand our country, I don't think we ever had any reliable unemployment data.
No, no, that's not fair. That's not true. We have a national sample.
Allow me to complete.
Yeah.
You know what happens that every 3 out of 4 families here are into self-employed or informal sector.
Yeah, that is why.
And therefore, unlike say US or any other developed country, India never had.
No, Nirmal, I must correct you here. I must correct you here. All through my career in economics, we have studied the National Sample Survey household data. We don't have employment exchange data, but we have a sample survey data. It's a survey data, and it surveys 180,000 households. Now, I was just asking around other economists in the United States, for instance, how many households they survey when they do their data. I was told by a professor that they survey 4,000 households. Now, 4,000 households for consumption data for a population of about 300 million. For a population 5 times that size, 130 billion, we are surveying 180,000 households. So, I mean, the NSSO is a very respected survey, according to the economists I spoke to, because not releasing that data is a fair charge. Why are you not releasing? There are previously 8 or 9 times that this survey has been released from the 80s. Why was this one not released? It's a fair ask, isn't it, from the economists?
No, it's a fair ask. I'm not saying why people should not ask. The question is twofold. One is that I think putting everything together and saying this government is, trying to hide every data and, trying to conspire around, showing data in a bad light. That is questionable. There is every right for every economist and every media person to ask and question data. And I agree with Nirmal that I don't think India, we have had any kind of seriously reliable unemployment data. And in last 4 or 5 years, so much of, I think, reforms have happened. I think that are also changing the way, employment is being done in this country. Self-employment is a lot more, promoted.
No, these are households. The NSSO doesn't go to corporates. It goes to households. So if you are self-employed, the household data will reflect it. Internationally, survey data will always say household should be the unit of, examination. So if you're an Ola or an Uber driver, household data will reflect it.
So maybe government has a reason to see that whether this data or the process is right or not, because see, look at government's argument that the number of PF account which has increased in this country in last 4 or 5 years is unprecedented. We are overlooking that data, but we are saying we will only look at one sample survey which is of 140,000 people. That is more reliable rather than the hard data of growth in the PF account, in the ESI accounts, because that is also representative data for employment. Okay. And government has time and again said that we will put down a proper mechanism to measure unemployment rate in the country. But that is not going to happen in a few years, and I am sure some point in time this question should be put forward that we should have a very reliable mechanism to calculate unemployment rate in the country.
Okay, Shireen?
Yeah, let me go across to Mr. Nagaraj. Mr. Nagaraj, what you've heard here from both Nirmal Jain as well as Vikas Khemani, saying that, look, there are other ways of being able to tell anecdotally and on the basis of other data that the economy is in fine fettle. And I think the sum and substance of the charge that's being put forward by the 131 Chartered Accountants is that look at the ease of doing business report, that look at what the World Bank and the IMF are saying about the Indian economy, the fact that the Indian economy is the fastest growing large economy today. So in that backdrop, is it fair for economists to put forward a picture that says that there is that the economic data process of putting data together in this country is in shambles? That's the sum and substance of the charge being made by these 131 chartered accountants in this open letter today.
Okay. Let me respond to one by one. One is that anecdotes don't make for evidence anywhere. I mean, please talk to statisticians who will tell you anecdotes are not evidence. First point. Secondly, the anecdotes the chartered accountants are talking about is about fractions of the economy. Like they are talking about ESIC data or the formal sector data. We all know, in fact, everybody knows that formal sector in India accounts for less than 20% of the workforce. I mean, you are leaving out the entire agriculture, you are leaving out the entire informal sector. So therefore, based on the formal sector employment, one cannot say anything at all about the employment situation in the country as a whole. Okay? About the other indicators like ease of doing business has been a very contested World Bank statistic. I mean, I can give you reasons. Globally, there is no correlation between improvement in ease of doing business and investment improvements. This is a statistically or econometrically proven fact. Second point, in fact, there are evidences like Russia improved its ranking from 120 to 20 in 6 years' time between 2012 and 2018. But did Russia's investment improve? No. Thirdly, ease of doing business methodology has been highly contested. In fact, in the case of India, if one takes an invariant methodology, that is, without changing the methodology, there is practically no improvement in India's ease of doing business index. This has been shown by research by Center for Global Governance in Washington. I mean, if the chartered accountants want, I'll be too happy to provide them all the evidence. Okay, and moreover, ease of doing business is a political index, as the former chief economist of the World Bank, Paul Romer, the Nobel laureate, has said so in his in World Bank's dispute with Chile, because in Chile the index of the ease of doing business was changing with whenever the change in the political color of the regime. So it's a very suspect index throughout the world.
Okay.
So
all right.
One cannot say anything using it.
That's as far as
unfortunately, the present government seem to think that's a great improvement, which is simply not true.
Okay.
That's the next one.
Okay.
And
so you're saying that the ease of doing business, very quickly, sir. I need to bring in Nirmal Jain. Go ahead.
True. It is, yes, that most of the 108, in fact, all of the 108 scholars who have signed are active users and active they intervene actively in the public policy discourse throughout the world.
Okay.
Okay. So
well, the argument that
I think is not correct. Okay. So I think a lot
fair
of
point.
these
Nirmal Jain,
do not add evidence.
Let me get them. Sure. Let me get the two signatories on the one. Yes, sir, you are. Let me get the two signatories on the 131 side to respond to the point that you're making. Nirmal Jain, Professor Nagaraj saying that, look, we are active economists. Don't try and belittle this debate as to one that is being politically motivated. And that's the argument that's been presented by Professor Himanshu, who's also on the panel, who was one of the signatories of the 108 letter. Nirmal, respond to that. And really, what is the way forward here? Because, for a healthy discussion, for a healthy debate, I mean, this is all, everyone I think has the best interests of the Indian economy at heart. These two sides must find middle ground and must work together as well. So Nirmal Jain, your parting thoughts on the program.
Yeah. So when we were just talking about employment, so if you look at the number of households they are taking, because India has 260 million households taking 5 years average family size, then the sample is less than 0.1%. And for a standard deviation in an Indian household population will be much higher as compared to any other country for that matter. So when the sample size is so small and so insignificant, why anecdotal evidence becomes, or not evidence or whatever you call it, the anecdotal feeling becomes better and important, because, rather than being precisely wrong, it's better to be vaguely right. Because when your sample is so small, so insignificant, and what we need today, we need a far better methodology to assess the real unemployment level. It can help policymakers, policymakers as well as RBI, because in India, central bank does not look at unemployment data, which every other country. To my mind, whatever data we get in terms of unemployment, as a citizen who's born and brought up in this country, it doesn't make sense. When things are looking better, you'll see numbers which are worse. When things are really looking much worse on the ground,
I'm just going to make a limited point here that I don't think anyone is arguing with the fact that we need to improve on our data collection as well. Sir worked 5 times, 8 times, 10 times to give out the headline number before, then that should have been as well. Or there should have been a national discourse or a public discourse on why this was no longer appropriate for India and hence had to be done away with or had to be reviewed or had to be redone. I think that's the limited point that's being made. Lata, go ahead.
Okay, no, Vikas, you wanted to comment on this
I
discussion.
want to make a very important point that we have a mindset problem. Just think about if this NSSO data, for some reason said we have had 15% growth in employment, I think all of us would be questioning the relevance of that data immediately. Same way, today Professor Nagaraj just now questioned relevance of World Bank data on ease of improving business and very nicely linked that there is no link to the investments scenario. So now let me flip the argument other way around. We have had record FDI investment in this country in the same environment where there is unemployment, when there is a questioning GDP data growth, then why, if there is no question, then why we are not looking at the change in the FDI or all the investment parameter in the environment. So I think we end up questioning, data suddenly if it does not really suit our every action of the government. I think look at the broader picture, directionally what is happening, economy is growing. And I think questioning IMF data on ease of improving business is, I think, bizarre thing in my opinion.
He's also questioning the way in which the same ease of doing business did not work in Russia and in Chile. So
But if it dropped about 20 points, then what would have been debating?
From
saying
120 to 20. That was okay.
If it dropped
1 minute.
40 points.
Unfortunately, we are out of time on the show, so I will have to wind this discussion. I don't think the economists are making the point in this letter, in the 108 economists, that India is not growing. That is not their charge. Their charge is when there was an unemployment data, why was it not released? Because the National Statistics Commission, which vetted it, resigned in protest because we vetted it and you are not releasing the data.
They just question World Bank ease of improving ranking.
That is now. That was not in the letter. That was not in the letter. The letter was only questioning the same NSSO has released a similar kind of survey 10 times in the past and the data was released. Now, similarly, when, every 4 or 5 years when that data survey is completed, why is it not getting released? Simply because it says that the unemployment is higher than the previous 40 years or so. Now, that's a fair comment. After it is released, a bunch of economists can question and say the methodology is bad, or, some other data is indicating something else. But to not release it is not making sense.
But if you are not confident about the data accuracy or rightness of the data, I think government has all its right to see whether to go back and say whether this is right data. I mean, it's right sample survey or not, because
all right,
giving wrong impression to the world at large.
I would argue it should be in the public domain so that everyone can argue, rather than get a stolen copy from the Business Standard to argue about it. My point is that data should be out in the open. Shireen, your word.
Well, gentlemen, it's been an exercise in trying to understand what has led to the 108 economists coming forward with very specific comments that they have made. Okay, you're saying elections, Vikas Khemani, that it's all coming down to elections. I would hope that that's not the case. I think that as a democracy, that is a thriving democracy, and our electoral process certainly is a thriving democratic process, that even public discourse, whether we agree or not, sometimes or all the time, I think this is part of a thriving and a healthy democracy, that we can actually have these conversations. Professor Himanshu, I'll give you the final closing say in 10 seconds, so we're completely out of time.
I just wanted to remind that on this channel itself, we had debates on the data quality, on data issues for the last so many years, even before this government came in, even when the 99-2000 consumption expenditure survey came in. So it's not that this is just happening once. So we had issues, and we have been debating about these issues for a number of things. But I think also wanted to point it out that sometimes it's related to that. I mean, we are not questioning every data. I mean, there's something which is there on the street also. I mean, like unemployment or say for a farmer crisis is there on the street. Just because the country is growing and therefore we should ignore all other aspects of the economy, I don't think it's unfair to the people. It's unfair to the democracy, unfair to users. And I think these are the things we should be debating rather than simply brushing under the carpet by saying that, look, economy is growing and therefore everything is hunky-dory. That I don't think is the right approach to dealing with the issue.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing out that we've been around for 19 years and we have addressed several of these issues, whether it's the ease of doing business report and the challenges with that, and the fact that we didn't do well on the ease of doing business report during the period of the UPA, and of course the fiscal deficit issues in the UPA. I mean, all of these issues we have debated several times over, and as I pointed out, a debate and discussion essential for a thriving democracy. I think everyone's interest is to see that the Indian economy continues to grow and grows much stronger. Vikas Khemani, Professor Himanshu, Nirmal Jain, Professor Nagaraj, thank you very much for joining us here on this CNBC TV18 special discussion. We'll take a break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere.